and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, today's guest on the podcast is Charlie Kirchofer. He's a listener to this podcast, and he reached out to me via email several weeks ago. He's a longtime sailor, but on relatively small boats. He recently purchased a 2022 Beneteau Oceanis 38.1. Very nice boat. And this boat's located in Annapolis, Maryland. And his home port is Boston, Massachusetts. So we talked about a couple of things. One, we talked about the criteria he used for purchasing a boat, because I always think that's sort of an interesting process, how people decide on what they're going to buy. And we also discussed how he's planning on moving his new boat from Annapolis to Boston.
Yeah, Bela, it's always great to bring in a listener, right? To learn about him and his story. And I think listeners will love this. Today, you're going to want to focus on what and why, kind of what happens and why it happens when sailors do decide to step into a larger boat. And I think this is a pretty common occurrence in the sailing world, right? You get to a point where you're ready to make that jump. So I think this will be really good for a lot of listeners. Super interesting. And again, like you mentioned, there'll be these three steps. One is choosing the boat. The second is purchasing the boat. And then the third is getting that boat from where you buy it to where you're going to keep it. So there's lots of factors to consider in all of this. And I think listeners will get a lot out of today's conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great sort of thing for folks to look at or look for, Mike, when they listen to the rest of this podcast. So let's dive right into our discussion with Charlie. Charlie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Bela. Nice to see you.
Yeah, same here. So thanks for agreeing to be on the podcast. And you wrote me an email. And as part of that email, one of the things you said was that you're buying a new boat, new to you, 38.1 Beneteau Oceanis. I think I got that right.
Yep.
And
that's the one.
you live up in the Boston area. You bought the boat down in Annapolis. And you got to figure out how to get it from Annapolis up to your home port. So I thought today we could talk about two things. One is to sort of talk about the process you went through in sort of selecting this boat and what criteria you used, because each of us uses a different criteria in picking a boat. That's why there's so many different designs.
Yep.
And sort of what that process was like, how you eliminated other boats and why you decided on this one. And then number two, to sort of talk about, okay, this is a pretty big trip, Annapolis to Boston, and how you are preparing for that trip and how you're preparing the boat for that trip and sort of what the plans are. And then hopefully once you get to Boston, we'll do another episode where we can talk about how all that went. So,
and hopefully it's not here are all the mistakes we made and why it went wrong.
Right. No. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, talk about the boat a little bit and sort of the process you went through and trying to sort through what boat is best for you guys.
Yeah. Good question. So when I started sailing, I got a small Rhodes 19 2 years ago and was sailing that around Boston Harbor, but pretty quickly, I knew I wanted a cruising boat that we could spend the night on and go places. And I did something that's probably not that smart in retrospect, which is I read Sailing a Serious Ocean by John Kretschmer, heavy weather sailing, and all these kinds of things about terrible storms at sea and sinking and all these things that could happen. And got myself very anxious about it. And also initially thought like, all right, it's got to be this blue water sailboat. Luckily, John Kretschmer also says, one of the questions you need to ask is whether you need a blue water sailboat. And I eventually realized, hey, that's not really what I'm doing. If we decide to sail to Europe at some point or cross oceans, we're probably going to be at a different boat. So let's look at the things that we're likely to do and what we want to do with it and how much time we're going to be spending on a mooring or at anchor versus sailing with it. And I like to sail, but even people who sail a lot spend, Lynn and Larry Party said 7 days in port for every 1 day on the water. So a lot of it was comfort, right? And also affordability and availability. And it ended up, I really liked the Jeanneau's, but there's just more Beneteaus out there. And so we ended up on a, 38 feet was actually the maximum that we could use at Savin Hill Yacht Club, where we're going to keep it for the lift to get it out of the water. So we said, all right, it's got to be 38 feet or less because it costs a lot more to keep it at a marina.
Yes.
But yacht clubs are, well, some of them anyway, are cheap or can be. So, 38 feet and comfortable light. We wanted something that doesn't feel like you go down into the dark, where we can spend time on it and have friends and things like that. And so Beneteau Oceanis 38.1 checked most of those boxes.
Well, that's great. You made a really good point there that oftentimes people end up buying a boat that they think that their dreams are about, right? I want to go across the Atlantic, or I want to, live on the boat full time. So they're buying this boat that's for their dream, but their dream is at least 5 or 10 years away. And so for the meantime, sort of coastal cruising or, day sailing, or maybe sailing just for 3 or 4 days at a time. You have a boat that's not sort of optimal for doing that. And so I think this notion of being realistic about how you're actually going to use the boat is really, really important.
And your partner too. So my husband had, he doesn't want to live on a small cramped thing we both like to be light and airy, but
sure,
the comfort aspect and spending time on it was super important. And, I'm not sure I'm interested in crossing oceans on it, or any boat. And he's definitely not, he doesn't want to do that. So,
right.
You think about it, you look at them together and see what makes sense. I also read, people saying they wish they had gotten the 2-cabin version with the extra storage space, right? Because they thought they were going to have people visit, and most of the time that didn't happen. We took that advice, and that's also the version that we went with. We didn't get 3 cabins, so we got there's extra shower space and a big locker for the cockpit. And even so, there's not loads of storage space on any boat, including this one. So I'm definitely glad we did that.
Right. It's so easy to get sucked into the mystique of a blue water cruise, a blue water ocean capable boat.
Right.
And I know, when we bought our boat, we did a couple things. One is we chartered a lot of different boats, and on purpose, I chartered different brands, different sizes, different models, because when you spend 5 days on a boat, you start learning about what you like, what you don't like. And that really helped us sort of narrow down, here's our list of 5 things we have to have on a boat. and here's the list of 10 things that are nice to have, but we don't have to have them. So that's good. So it sounds like you went through this process, and then talk about sort of how many boats did you look at? Was this particular model, the Beneteau Oceanis, on the top of your list just based on your reading, or did you have to go look at a bunch of boats to sort of narrow things down?
Well, we looked at, Dufour, Jeannot, a whole bunch of, basically any boats in the 34 to 38 feet range.
Okay.
Anything smaller than 34 feet, we quickly realized was just really small. Also, I'm 6'2", my husband's 6'4", and most boats do not have standing headroom, especially if they're any less than 38 feet. And most of them, they got to get into 40 feet. And the only ones, actually, Jeannots are quite tall. And Beneteau is close. So, and I initially really liked some of the Jeannot models, and we almost got one, but someone offered more than we did. And so it got snapped up, and so there were a couple things like that happened. And we actually put down an offer on this boat twice. And then the seller decided he didn't get the boat that he was buying that he wanted. So he decided not to sell. And then it ended up back on the market again. And we were ready. We were more ready by that time. We had been saving. It had actually been too early. So we put on an offer again for less and said, throw in winter storage as the last negotiating point. We got that. So we got winter storage in Annapolis. So that was kind of how we landed on that. We didn't look at loads of boats because it was like Jeannot, Beneteau, 38 feet. only ones we can stand up in. We can't go larger. We didn't want to go smaller. So that narrowed it down nicely for us.
Yeah. No, I think it's real important to have that criteria, because otherwise it's like you can go nuts just looking at boats. And it's not like driving down to the 3 car dealerships that are within 2 miles of your house to go look at boats. Sometimes it's a 2-day trip, and you try to tie in a bunch of boats along your path. Yeah.
No, there weren't loads of options within our price range, and honestly where we can stand up inside. And people at boat shows were like, oh, well, you can stand like this. I was like, come on. You usually be sitting down. I'm like, that's true, but I don't want to have to do like this all the time in the boat. We knew we didn't want that.
That's right. And, you can hit your head a lot on a boat.
I already have.
Yes.
Just the last time we were there, I hit my head and I said, well, that's the first time hitting that bulkhead.
Yeah. You will hit it many more times.
Yeah.
Very neat. So, did you use a broker?
We did. Yep. We used a broker who we met him at the Jeannot stand at the Newport boat show, and because we liked the Jeannot models, but he's I guess kind of an agent for Jeannot, but he's also a broker for anything. And we ended up not buying a Jeannot anyway, but we stuck with him. And he also has a boat at Savin Hill, and he delivers boats in the Caribbean in the winter. So it seemed like a good choice, and a lot of people around here know him, so we knew he was legit.
And what parts of the process was he helpful in? How did he guide you? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot like buying a house, and we were equally clueless about things like, we found the boat, right? Like we found, like, this boat looks good. Having him also be able to look at it and say, yes, I agree that looks good, or here's some red flags. There was a boat we looked at where I was like, well, maybe it's okay. It looks kind of dirty. But he noted that the places it was dirty suggested that it probably wasn't well maintained. So we could definitely look at it, but he had some advice there. But for the most part, we said, hey, how about this boat? And then, but the whole process of buying it, how do you make an offer? What's a reasonable offer? How do you counter? Where do I get insurance from? Because we made a big leap. Geico, Progressive, they wouldn't insure us. But he had a connection with a marine insurance agency, and they got us a really reasonable policy that they were able to find that our normal agent couldn't. So he had that. He knew the financing company, and just pulling all those things together the same way our real estate agent did, that was super helpful. And it would have been a very stressful and confusing process, I think, if we didn't have him to handle that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, did he go with you to look at boats?
Yes. We went to look at it for the survey. So let's see, did we actually make an offer sight unseen? Yeah, we did. We did, but contingent on the survey, obviously.
Sure.
And looking at it. I mean, it's a 2022 and with 100 engine hours. So we knew that it was lightly used and pretty new, and it was relatively safe to go look at it. It was relatively safe to assume it was in good condition. And, we went and looked at it, and, a couple things here or there, but it was, but yeah, he was there for the survey, and also hooked us up with who's a good marine surveyor in the Annapolis area where we have 0 connections. Right. So that was also good.
Right. So he traveled down to Annapolis with you guys for the survey.
He did. Yep.
And did you guys pay for his expenses, or was that part of his?
No, I was surprised.
Cost of doing business.
Yeah, that was part of his fee. I would have if he had said, okay, you pay my expenses, but he didn't ask, and neither did I. But,
yes.
No, he didn't.
Okay, good. So did you hire him as a buyer's broker, or did he just get paid out of the normal commission split that brokers make when the boat gets sold?
He was paid out of the commission split. Yeah,
Perfect.
I think it went half between him and the seller representative.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Those are just great questions, right? That people are certainly curious about. Yeah. So you had the survey done, and once you got the survey, were there any issues with the boat that, you went back and renegotiated, or was it pretty clean?
The only thing where we had required them to do something was there's actually a warranty repair to the hull near the bow thruster, which so it was actually being sold by the broker down there. That guy finally sold the boat to the broker themselves. They had already contacted Beneteau about that, so they were doing it anyway. So, we said that needs to be complete before we
Yes.
take it. I think they had until April 1st or something to complete the repair. Other than that, no. I mean, it was little things like the smoke detector batteries were dead, or the fire extinguishers weren't mounted. The surveyor said the battery terminals should really be covered, even though they're underneath the bed, the bunk, things like that. So he pointed out stuff like that, but there was nothing that was, nothing worth quibbling about or having them do.
Yeah.
So
okay, very good. Well, that sounds easy. Sounds nice and clean. Not a lot of things to pull your hair out over and say, oh, should we do it? Should we not do it? Right. It's one of those things. I was in the venture capital business for a while, and we used to have this saying when we're getting ready to or thinking about making an investment in a company, we'd say this deal is either gaining momentum or it's losing momentum. Right. And it sounds like once you found this boat, things were gaining momentum. It was going to happen.
Yeah. And we had looked at it previously. We not looked at it in person, but we had considered buying it previously. So we already knew, and it had a lot of extra things that we wouldn't necessarily, it wasn't on our needs list, but it was on the nice to haves. Like it has a generator and reverse cycle heat and air conditioning and stuff like that. So we're like, wow, I mean, that will be very comfortable, and we'll be able to work from there more easily, charge devices. We won't have to worry about stuff like that. So sure, it's a cool boat.
Yeah.
And we wanted a classic main. I didn't want in-mast furling. And there are very few Beneteaus without in-mast furling these days.
Right. That's right.
That was another thing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is pretty rare these days for sure. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was insurance, and that was sort of a bit of a challenge. So talk through that. I know when I bought our boat, I made a big leap from a 22-foot boat to a 45-foot boat. And even though I had ASA courses and did a lot of chartering, I had a 5-page sailing resume. I still was not easy to get insurance. And so talk through that process a little bit.
Yeah. And we had the ASA courses that my husband and I both did those. But yeah, they don't care too much about them, it seems like. And they told us several of them were like, they allow a 10-foot jump and that's it. They won't do more than, so we could have gone to 29 feet and then 39, but we couldn't have done it in one jump. So many just rejected outright. But he was like, talk to Triton Insurance in Newport, talk to Laura, right? He gave us the name. And so we did that, and she found the Cincinnati insurance companies. And the rate was, we've been expecting, what do they say? How many % of the boat's value that you can expect? But it was actually less than that. So it turned out not being bad at all. Yeah. So we took a very high deductible. That's one of the things we do with insurance in general. I figure I'm not going to file a claim for $500 or $1,000. I'm going to file a claim if it's really bad. Right? And so I might as well set a high deductible because if you file a claim, your rate's going to go up. So you're probably, even if it's within the deductible, it's probably best not to file a claim and just take care of it yourself. So that was our reasoning there. And that I think helps. Yeah. And then of course there's the 5% named windstorm deductible. That's even bigger.
Yes.
So yeah, so it wasn't too bad then, but it was kind of a specialty insurance agency they don't do only marine insurance, but I'd recommend anyone trying to do that. They found insurance really quickly because they knew how to do it. Our normal insurance agent could not. So
yeah. So it was Triton Insurance, you said, of Newport?
Yeah. Yep.
Very good.
We're great.
And are there limitations on where you can take the boat as part of this policy?
Not too. I only looked at, hey, is it going to be? Am I going to be able to deliver it? And am I going to be able to sail around New England? And that for sure. I imagine I imagine you can't go to Florida during hurricane season, but I honestly, it's been 5 months since I read the policy, so I don't remember. But it was not very restrictive. It was pretty open. There may be a restriction how far offshore, but if there is, it was well within anything that I was planning to do. So
yeah, great.
I'm not worried about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, like on my policy, there's a restriction on, since I'm up in New England in Narragansett Bay, when it has to be out of the water. Or I should say, it doesn't say it has to be out of the water. It needs to be decommissioned.
Okay.
So,
I'll have to check. I should probably know, but I looked over it and it seemed reasonable, and I haven't looked at it since last
I remember
October.
reading that on mine. And being surprised. It was like, okay, I have to be out of the water, I think, like between November 1st and April 1st.
Okay.
Or I shouldn't say I said that again incorrectly. It needs to be decommissioned. I can't be using the boat, right? So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I will check. That's it. Thanks for flagging that. I'll look it up.
Yeah. Okay. So now you got the boat, you got the insurance, the boat's in Annapolis, you're in Boston. So talk about how you've been thinking about this.
So luckily our broker, as I mentioned, he delivers boats too. So that was already kind of, we were talking about how we're going to get it up, and he's like, I can bring it up for you. And he's like, you can come along with if you want. And I said, yeah, I think I definitely want to do that. We definitely weren't considering doing it ourselves. So, but the idea of doing it with someone, I thought that's a great, what better introduction to how everything on our boat works than 4 intensive days of sailing it. So that was kind of the plan from the start. But then there was also the winterization and the recommissioning and all of that. And I initially had ideas of, I'm going to go down and do it myself. And then it turned out to be much easier to pay the people next door in the yard to come out and do the winterizing, taking the sails down, like rather than, going down and trying to figure it out and not having any supplies and having to buy it all there. And then where do I, it was all this stuff where it was just like, I'm just going to to have someone else do that.
Right.
And it was, and it wasn't crazy either, because it's not a lot of, they take the sails off, they put some antifreeze in the water tank. I had them change the oil and the oil filters and fuel filters, and take a fuel sample as well and check for water and sediment, because I'm just nervous about stuff like that. And they said it all looked fine. And the tank was topped off. I had told them put some biocide in it, and they did that. So, and they kind of the same thing happened with commissioning. Our broker said, yeah, I'll go down with you. We'll go down before and get the boat ready. And then he said, I've got a bunch of deliveries. I don't think I have time. And I said, I don't know if we have time. So we're actually hiring someone to pump out the antifreeze and flush the tanks and get it ready and put some prop speed on the prop and the bow thruster. So yeah, we're doing that again. So we're getting all that stuff prepped, although we will be down there on Sunday, the 27th. And then the launch date is the 28th. And a guy that our broker knows is going to help us put it in the water and get it on a mooring and all that kind of stuff, and make sure everything's working fine. Because, I'm 90% certain I can take the boat from a dock and put it on a mooring. But I'm not even totally sure how to start the engine. So I believe it's just a push button and it's fairly simple, but 19-foot open sailboat to this.
Yes.
My only experience is, a couple sails on friends' boats and our ASA course. I'd like to have someone there just to help us out. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's really wise is to have someone there who is knowledgeable in what you're doing. Because I mean, like on my boat, to start the engine, you turn the key. to turn the engine off, you push a button. And
Right.
if you turn the key to turn the engine off, you have the possibility of doing all sorts of electrical damage to the alternator and the charging systems and stuff, right? So that's just a little subtlety that you'd say, oh yeah, you turn the key to turn it on. Why wouldn't you turn the key to turn it off? But it's not how it works. So
Yep, I would not have thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of little things like that it's really good to have someone with you who is sort of knowledgeable in it, and it kind of sort of a primary set of eyes, and then it relieves the stress from you, and it at least for me, I can learn better when I'm not stressed, right? When I'm stressed, my brain is 99% occupied with dealing with the stress. If I'm not stressed, then I'm open to learning and can learn more effectively and efficiently. So that's great. And so you're going down the end of this month, right? It's April it's April 16th as we're recording this. You're going down towards the end of the month. And how have you thought about provisioning the boat and getting food and
we've started
all those things.
We've started taking supplies down, in suitcases and putting them, like we've got bed sheets that we've got ready that we're putting on. We brought down stuff like foul weather gear and the toolbox and the ditch bag with the EPIRB and the MOB devices is down on the boat already. And so we're bringing stuff down in some stages, and then provisioning we're going to do. Actually, when we go down to do the actual delivery, we're going to do it together with the broker and get the stuff we need. But, we're thinking about one thing we discovered: the boat was very dirty. It's in a dirt or gravel yard, and over the winter, I think there's been clouds of dust that have gone by, and it inevitably got inside as well. Like, maybe we want to give the boat a bit of a clean before we head out. Yeah. We need a bucket or cleaning supplies or a brush or toilet paper, right? Like, better not forget about that. We need to get some single ply. So, we've got some shopping lists, but yeah, it's a heck of a lot of planning, and having it somewhere else with people you haven't met doing work when you're not sure they've done it is it's a lot of back and forth, and it's stressful to me because a lot of people who do work on a contract basis don't seem to be good at replying to things and keeping you in the loop. And so I've had to follow up, and I'm a little bit nervous about the guy who said, oh yeah, no problem, I'll commission it, because he sent me a checklist of things. So what things would you like to do? I checked it off. I sent it back. Haven't heard from him. So I called him and he said, oh yeah, sorry, I've just been busy. I'll get to it. Still haven't heard from him. Emailed him yesterday. No reply. So I'm like, all right, I emailed him yesterday. We're launching in 2 weeks. So you're going to have this done, right? Because we can't arrive and have none of it done. So that's what makes me a little bit nervous. And also he needs to show up on that day. So we're flying down, and plane tickets and hotel, and, so all that's a little bit nerve-wracking. Not the end of the world, I suppose, if it's launched a little bit late, although we have to start paying for yard space and we have to come back again, and that pushes out delivery. So it's a mess if it hasn't happened on time. So it's definitely a lot of project management.
Yes, it sure is. And now you understand why so many people who do this are retired or have taken a leave of absence from work or whatever, so that you have that flexibility in time, right? If you're working, okay, I'm going to schedule it for these days. You don't have the flexibility of, okay, we're going to delay it a week. I mean, maybe you do, but it's not easy to do that when you have all sorts of other commitments in your life. And I feel real fortunate because we bought our boat on Narragansett Bay, and I keep it on Narragansett Bay. So it was like a 2-hour sail from where I bought it to where I keep it. So that part was really easy. It was stress-free.
Yeah, having that, we're really looking forward to having the boat here, and if something needs to be done, we just can go over and do it or whatever. We know where it is and how things work, but we're reliant on a lot of people. And you have to spend money having people do things because you don't have time while you're working. So if I had time to go and spend a week down there, I can make sure I've got stuff and do a lot of these things myself. But yeah,
Very nice.
that's that planning aspect of it. The other thing planning is for the actual delivery is
Yeah.
we're waiting for a weather window. We're going to wait for a weather window after it's in the water. We'll come back fairly short notice. But we don't know when that weather window is going to be. And luckily, well, I just got a new manager at work.
Oh boy.
So I told him, hey, by the way, I'm going to be taking a couple of days off in May, but I'm not sure which two. So we're going to do it over a weekend plus 2 days. And so I have on my calendar all these tentative PTO holds for like 3 weeks where I could be out any of these days, and I don't know which ones. Luckily they're cool with it, or apparently, so that, you know, they're kind of like, wow, that's what you're doing. That's kind of amazing. So I'm glad I have that support. But I think in a lot of places, being like, I'm going to be out 2 of these 12 days, but I'm not sure which 2 would be a non-starter.
You can't do it. Right. It would be a non-starter. Right. Right.
So then you'd have to pay someone to just deliver it. You wouldn't be able to go on the trip. But I wanted to do that and learn from it. So
yeah,
and I'm lucky.
Right. Or your criteria changes for purchasing the boat, and it has to be within a, you know, half-day sail from wherever your home port is.
Yeah, or you spend you know, a couple months sailing it on weekends up or something like that, and going back and forth. So it starts to get pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. So your trip up from Annapolis to Boston, talk about the route you're going to take and what you have planned for that.
Yeah, so the route is up to the C&D Canal and through that, so up the Chesapeake, C&D Canal, down Delaware Bay, and then around Cape May, New Jersey, and a stop to refuel probably in Atlantic City. So pump out, refill with water, refuel. There, you know, it is a delivery. We are on a timeline. The skipper also has things to do. We got to get back to work. So if it's dead calm, we're going to motor the whole way. And, you know, that may be okay. I'd prefer dead calm to rough, right? So, but whatever anywhere from, you know, totally calm to nice sailing winds is kind of what we're looking for.
Sure.
And we are not going to go if the wind's from the northeast, because we're going mostly in that direction. So we're waiting for the prevailing southwesterlies to fill in.
Yes.
So it should be mostly downwind, especially the offshore part. Going down Delaware Bay, we'll probably be working against the wind. So I expect we'll be motoring a lot there. We'll probably be, we'll definitely be motoring in the C&D Canal, right? So we'll definitely have to refuel in Atlantic City, because I think with 35 gallons of diesel, a gallon an hour, we're estimating, we've got at most a day and a half of motoring range. So I think that's supposed to be 1 day roughly to Atlantic City, refuel, and then it's a day and a half roughly there to Block Island, and then about a day up to Boston. But we also have a decision point there where we can bail out in Newport, for example, if, say, because that weather window, we're looking at pretty far out from the time we say, all right, we gotta put our dog at board, send the dog to boarding, we got to get our stuff, we got to buy tickets, we got to fly down, provision. So it's a 4-day trip, but it's more like a 6-day weather window. So it could be that by the end there, we say, all right, we're gonna bail out in Newport, and we'll come back on a weekend and then sail it up the rest of the way. And I suppose too, Atlantic City is another bailout point. You know, we get a day in and oops, the forecast changed. You know, so I've already thought about, all right, I'm gonna make sure that, because that's going to be expensive, because we'll probably have to leave it at a dock, but I'm going to do that rather than go out in rough weather that is going to be scary, right? So we've got at least 2 points where we can say go, no go.
Yeah. Whenever I do planning for a trip, the weather forecast for the next 48 hours is usually pretty good, but after that, it's a crapshoot. So I always try to plan a bailout point, as you call it, which I think is, you know, within 24 to 48 hours of my departure. I want to have a place where I could go tuck into, just because, I mean, I've been in plenty of situations where, even for the next 24 hours, the wind forecast is off by 10 knots, and it's rarely off. They thought it was going to be 20, but it's only 10. It's usually they thought it would be 15, but now it's 25.
Right.
That's been my experience, or at least that's the ones I remember.
Right.
So very good. Yeah. And have you seasickness? Do you worry about that?
Yep, a little bit. So we we went on a trip to the Galapagos 2 years ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
we were on a boat that was doing a lot of this. We were bashing to weather. It wasn't a sailboat, but it was, kind of it was a very rolly, small tour, not a tour boat, but it had cabins. I think there were about 10 or 15 passengers on board, and then some crew. So fairly small, which is a great way to see the Galapagos, by the way. But it was rough, especially that time of year. And I had scopolamine. I had a scopolamine patch,
Yes.
which worked great for the first 24 hours or so, and then it washed off when I was swimming. So I put on another one, and maybe I just got too high a dose then, but my vision went all blurry. So I couldn't see anything. I couldn't focus up close, and I felt kind of dizzy, and so I thought, oh, this is the scopolamine. So I took it off, and then 6 hours later, I got seasick. So, and that didn't. I don't get it too severely. So one of the things I learned that seasickness is not the end of the world, at least for me. I wasn't vomiting or anything like that. I just felt crappy.
Yeah.
But I also, when it got to the evening, even going on land didn't fix it though. We had a land excursion. We were on land for 6 hours. I was still doing this, and I still felt sick. I took a Dramamine.
Yes.
About half an hour later, I was getting very tired, but was suddenly hungry, ate a big dinner, went to bed, and woke up the next morning feeling amazing.
Oh, wow.
So I think and I've heard too that Dramamine gets people, like, you take it, you pass out. So if you're solo sailing, you can't do that, but I'm not, luckily. But when you recover, when you come back from it, the seasickness is gone and tends to stay away. It gets you used to it, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
So that's I'm thinking about that. I might try the meclizine, the less drowsy 12-hour one.
Yes.
But I'm thinking I should probably test it this weekend and see if it makes me drowsy, because I am crew. I'm not a passenger on this, so I can't just be like, all right, I'll see you guys in
Right.
Block Island. I'm going to go to bed. No, I've got to help.
Yes.
But if it's a couple of hours while I'm off watch, maybe I can do that if I'm feeling particularly seasick. So I'm trying to figure out strategies there. But yeah, next step is to test the meclizine. A friend of mine says it doesn't make her drowsy at all. But I also know it's less effective than either scopolamine or the what is it, diamond hydronate or diphenhydramine, yes. Whatever the Dramamine is. Yeah.
Dramamine, yeah. So for me, the patches work great. That's what I use, and I've never gotten seasick, but I've always worn a patch. So it's not something I want to test. And it doesn't make me drowsy. I don't
Right.
have hallucinations like some people do and stuff. So knock on wood, that works for me. But I always carry the patches with me, and I carry Dramamine with me as well.
Yeah.
Just in case. So I had another question for you. So there's going to be 3 of you on this trip. So you have captain and then 2 of you. How have you guys talked about watch schedules and how you're going to do that?
Yeah, a little bit. So my husband and I want to do ours together, at least the night watches. So I was thinking it would make sense to do 3 hours on, 3 hours off, 2 times. That gets us through 12 hours. And then I'm thinking maybe during the day we can do 3 separate watches and stretch them out to 4 hours. So I got to talk to the skipper and see how he feels about him, what he usually does. Some people don't do day watches at all. It's just whoever is, wants to be up at the helm. But I'm thinking it'd be nice to have some uninterrupted nap time during the day to recover from the night. So one of the things I'm very aware of, I think the issues we're going to have will be potentially cold. It'll be early May, so we got lots of gear with us. Seasickness. and exhaustion. So
Yes.
those are the three. And that last one is probably the hardest to do anything about, except to try to sleep when you can, whenever you can. But if you're bouncing around, we're also going to be excited, possibly anxious, definitely anxious, possibly scared. So it's going to be, I know I'm not going to sleep those first 24 hours as much as I try. My hope is that on day 2, at some point, that I can crash and get some decent sleep and get into a rhythm, just in time to finish. Probably.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think what I have found for myself, when there's just 2 of us on the boat, 3 on and 3 off, and I'm always tired. When there's 3
Mhm.
people on the boat, you can do 3 on and 6 off.
Right.
And that 6 hours makes all the difference. And I like to do schedules 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
so that even during the day, like you said, I know that I'm not on duty for these, whether it be 3 hours or 6 hours, and I will
Mhm.
go take a nap. And I think I've said it on this podcast. I've been on trips before and people make fun of me. Oh, Bela, you're always taking naps. And that's because there may be a period of time when you have to stay up for 6 hours straight. And if you
Right.
haven't been taking your naps, you're really exhausted. You make bad decisions. So I'm always very opportunistic about taking a nap when I can. And that's what I like about scheduling watch daytime and nighttime. So then, I can go do something else. Even if it's
Yeah,
just sort of relax a little bit and rest and, et cetera.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. If we have 3, then times 4 gives us 12 hours and fills that in.
Yeah.
And then there's potentially like, all right, I'm exhausted. I got 8 hours. I can go really try to get a nap, and even if it's drifting in and out of sleep for several hours, at least you're getting some rest. So that's the hope there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because when
and
you're,
I've
when
taken
you're
I've
going,
taken your advice to heart, because I've heard you say that you grab those naps whenever you can. I'm
yeah.
hoping I can sleep, but I'm definitely going to try.
Yeah. Well, you get tired enough, you'll fall asleep.
Right. Right. Yeah. Day
Right.
2 or 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first part of the trip, Annapolis up to the C&D Canal and motoring down, and even if you sail down the Delaware, long as the tide and the wind are not against each other, will be pretty flat and pretty calm.
Right.
It's when
Right.
you get out into the ocean, you'll have those big rollers that, will either be rocking you asleep or bouncing you off the walls of the cabin and
Right.
making
And
it
that's
almost
the
impossible to
problem,
sleep. Yeah.
because I think the first 24 hours, I'm just going to have trouble sleeping because it's new and excitement.
Yes.
And then when I'm really tired, that's what we're going to
That's
be
right.
rolling. So I am concerned about that, but there's not much we can do except to just try. So
Yeah,
try to
it'll
wedge
work out.
myself into a corner. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Sometimes having big pillows and stuff are helpful, because you can put them on one side of you and the hull of the boat on the other side, and wedge yourself in a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
learn to do all sorts of little tricks. Very good. Hey, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I don't think so. I think I'll have a lot more to share, hopefully, after the actual journey.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Charlie. Thank you so much for sharing the boat buying experience and sort of the planning of the trip up, and kind of some of your anxieties about it, which I think
Lots
we
of
all
anxieties.
have, right?
Yeah.
We all have, and some of us just don't admit it. So I thank you so much, and I do look forward to connecting with you again once the trip is done, and I'm sure that'll be another great podcast. So thanks again so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Bela. Have a good evening.
Really cool interview, Bela. I mean, what an interesting story. I mean, lots of lessons learned, lots going on here. What were your key takeaways? And maybe let's start with the choice, choosing the right boat.
Boy, I tell you, choosing a right boat is really a challenge. Fiberglass boats, which they've been making now since the mid 60s, tend to last a long, long, long time. So you can buy boats that were made in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, 2020s. The point being, there's a lot of different variations out there, a lot of different models. And unlike cars, which maybe last 10 to 15 years, right? Boats last 20, 30, 40 years. So the selection is endless. And so having some sort of specific set of requirements that helps you focus and narrow down the type of boat you want to look for, not just the size. So the length of the boat, okay, I want something between 35 and 40 feet or between 40 and 45 or whatever your numbers are. That's important. But even within that, you got to think about, how am I going to use the boat? And I think one of the things that people often sort of misdo, I can't think of the right word for this, is they buy the boat for their aspirations and not how actually they're going to use the boat for the next 5 or 6 years. They say, oh, I want to sail it around the world. Well, you're still working full time. You got kids in elementary school. You're probably not going to sail around the world for a while. So buy a boat that works for you, that meets your requirements, and how you're going to use it now. So I think that's really important. The other thing that we did this for like 10 years. We chartered boats. So every year I would go charter 1 or 2 boats for a week. And I specifically chartered different brands of boats, different sizes, different models, because when you're on a boat for 5-6 days, you start to learn about what works for you, in the galley, what works for you in the bed layout and sort of the layout of the various different rooms on the boat, what works out for you in the cockpit, how big a cockpit do you need? Because you can buy a 40-foot boat that has a very small cockpit, and you can buy a 40-foot boat that has a huge cockpit, right? But if things in the cockpit change in size, that means things down below change in size. So I think chartering is a great way to sort of sort through the things that work for you and what don't work for you.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, Bela. And I thought Charlie told a great story about how he and his husband kind of figured out what they wanted and made this checklist and did a really nice job.
Yes.
Because as you implied, it's all about trade-offs. And, I think Charlie made the point at some point, the space is small and you're never going to have enough storage space, but how important is it? Things like that. So I love the idea that you figure out where the trade-offs are. And you make those choices. And yeah, you don't have to worry that it's for the next 20 years. I love this idea of, buy a boat for the next 3 to 5 years and you'll be fine. If you need to step up again, you can. So I thought that was pretty cool. Let's talk a little bit about the next step, kind of the purchasing process. And Charlie made a lot of great points about this too. So in your opinion, maybe just summarizing, what are the kind of the 3 or 4 most important points that somebody should be thinking about when they're stepping up and buying their first larger boat?
Yeah. So I think for the purchasing process, particularly if it's the first time you're buying a large boat, is you should have a broker. Buying a boat is not like buying a car. It's much more like buying a house. You get a survey, it's called. Well, in a home, it's called a home inspection. On a boat, they call it a survey. So you hire somebody to come in and look at the boat and maybe find the various things that are difficult for you to see, because they do this for a living, right? But they can find things that might be wrong with the boat, or things that will need to be fixed at some point in time. And it's more of a complicated process, right? Most of these boats, let's face it, if you're buying, a relatively new boat, you're probably paying $100,000, $200,000, maybe $300,000 for it. So it's a big chunk of money. And as a buyer, you don't pay for the broker. It's just like in real estate, right? The brokerage fee comes out of the sales commission that the seller is paying for. So it works just like real estate. Although I will say that in a boat, the typical commission is 10%. So it's pretty steep. But as even Charlie said, right, the broker went with them down to Annapolis to look at the boat. And when we bought a boat, we had a broker that we used, and I was surprised that he'd hop in a car and drive for an hour and a half and be there when we looked at a boat to help sort of guide us and answer questions and point things out. So just like when you're buying a house, the broker makes a difference. So don't work with the very first one you meet. It's like, go talk to several of them, try to get recommendations, try to, talk to other people who that maybe have larger boats and say, hey, what broker did you use? Can you recommend somebody? So I think that that part is really important. Then the whole process of, having an escrow and the money changing hands and, turning over the keys, etc. That's a whole process, just like buying a house. And certain boats you may want to register with you can register boats in one of two ways. You can either be registered at the state level, just sort of like your car is, or you can actually register them with the U.S. Coast Guard. And if you register them with the Coast Guard, that's a little bit of an expense, but it sort of gives you a much more traceable title for the boat and ownership history. So most people on larger boats register them with the U.S. Coast Guard. And if you ever think about taking your boat to a foreign country like the Bahamas, then you really should register it with the U.S. Coast Guard, because it's going to make entrance into that country a whole lot simpler. So anyway, those are some of the things that you got to sort through, and a broker can help with all of those things. I know in our case, the broker helped with a bunch of that stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. And I thought the insurance piece also was another one that Charlie talked a lot about. And that's again where a broker making a recommendation made a big difference. It's it's insiders versus outsiders. And if you're new to, even if you've been sailing for a long time, the world of large boats to me sounds like a little bit of an insider's thing. And there's some big differences, and you got to know somebody who's inside to learn some of these tips and tricks and kind of stuff like that. So yeah, I thought the broker was this nice person that helps you go from the outside of the large boat world into the inside.
Yep.
And he has a fiduciary duty to do that, right? And so a good broker will help you with that stuff, because that's what he's earning his commission based on. So
that's right. And their reputation is everything.
Cool stuff. So, all right, third point now, the moving process, right? And this was fascinating to me as well. What are your main takeaways on how you approach moving a large boat that you're not familiar with, right? And you've been involved in this a few times, not only on your own, but with some other people. What's kind of your main takeaways on that before we wrap up?
Yes. So the good news is there's a lot of boats out there that are on the market that you can buy. The bad news is they're probably not geographically close to where you are. So after you buy it, you got to figure out how you're going to get it to your home port. Listeners might recall that in episode 128, Dan Kirpelman, who's a very experienced coastal cruiser, discussed in that episode how he moved his new to him boat from Florida up to Maine. He did it himself, him and his wife, but they're very experienced and they took several months to do it. Charlie, on the other hand, has very limited coastal experience. So one of the options is you can hire a captain, and which is a licensed captain. They have a U.S. Coast Guard license. And there are people who do this for a living. They move people's boats, right? Just like with many things, there's a migration of boats in the fall from the northern part of the United States to the southern part of the United States. There's a migration in the fall of boats from the Mediterranean down to the Caribbean. So there's people, professional people, who move boats for owners. And so you can hire a captain, and they can move the boat for you. They'll do the whole thing. Or, as Charlie's doing, you can go with the captain. You can be the crew for the captain, which I think is a great idea, because you're going to spend a week on your boat, and with an experienced person. And a lot of people do this even when they buy a boat locally. They will hire a captain to go out with them for a day or two to sort of show them the ropes on the boat. So that's a good idea, not only for moving the boat, but also sort of, the captain being sort of like an instructor in many ways to sort of help you learn how to sail your boat. The one thing I will say is that when you hire a captain and the captain hires a crew, they're on a schedule. They want to move the boat, and they may be very comfortable in going out in conditions that you're not, or at least you're not at this comfortable in going out in those conditions at this phase of your sailing career. So have a conversation with the captain. If you're hiring the captain and you're going to be the crew, have the conversation with them about, okay, what route are we going to take? How much are we going to be? How far offshore are we going to be? What conditions are you tolerant of? What kind of watch schedules you're going to try to have on the boat? So don't assume all these things. Just have the conversation with the captain and make sure you have an agreement and understanding of sort of, particularly as Charlie and I talked about sort of your risk tolerance. What level of sea conditions and wind conditions and boat conditions are you comfortable with? Because chances are the captain's a lot more comfortable in rough conditions than you are. So you want your experience to be a good one on your boat. It's your first experience on your boat, and you want it to be enjoyable. So have that conversation. The captain works for you. So you can say, no, listen, I don't, if it's the waves are bigger than 6 feet, I don't want to go out. And so we're going to sit for a day or two. You're going to have to pay the captain for those days, of course, but that's okay. You can sail around the bay and they can give you some more lessons, or you can explain some other things on your boat. So it's not just sitting around twiddling your thumbs. There's still value you can get from that, even if you're not out in the ocean sailing.
Great, Bela. Nicely summarized, right? This role of moving the boat and having an experienced captain, I think, makes total sense to me. But great overall, nicely done. Really interesting. I thought this would be great for listeners who are either thinking about stepping up into a new boat, or to share with people who might be thinking about getting their first larger boat. Super good, helpful tips. I don't know. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
Nope. I think it's time to wrap this one up, Mike.
Great. Listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. We hope you found our conversation with Charlie today interesting and thought-provoking. If you have questions about what we've discussed, as always, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that like or follow button on your podcasting app, or leave us a review. We would appreciate that. If you know of someone that would make a good guest for the show, let us know. Have them reach out to us, or you can reach out to us, and we'll get in contact with them. So that's it for today's episode. Hope to see you out there on the water soon. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. Take care.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, thanks for listening, and see you next time.